Hello, and welcome back to Umbral Dread. I'm glad you're here. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from tonight. I always enjoy reading them. Tonight, you'll be joining me for 2 hours of slow, unsettling horror stories, carefully told to help you relax, unwind, and drift into the darkness. There will be only 2 or 3 ads during the first 10 minutes. After that, the rest of the journey is completely uninterrupted. If you enjoy quiet, immersive horror and sleep-friendly storytelling, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, settle in, let your body become perfectly still, and allow the sounds of the outside world to disappear into silence. Tonight, beyond the last light, a forgotten story is waiting, hidden where only the shadows remain. So close your eyes, listen carefully, and leave the waking world behind. Welcome to Umbral Dread. Let's begin. Story 1. The specimen rarely moves far from the person it has bitten. After feeding and delivering its venom, it usually retreats to a nearby corner of the room. In most recorded cases, it climbs to the highest point it can reach and presses itself flat against the ceiling. Its body becomes so thin that in poor lighting, it can easily be mistaken for a stain, a crack, or a patch of mold. It remains there for hours, sometimes days. The specimen does not sleep in any way we understand. Its legs stay spread against the ceiling, and its many eyes remain open. When the bitten person moves, the creature's eyes follow them. When the bitten speaks, cries, or screams, the creature appears to watch with great interest. It does not attempt to assist the bitten person. It does not protect them from outside threats, bring them food, or guide them through the transformation. Even when the bitten individual is restrained, injured, or close to death, the original biter remains still. The reason for this behavior is not fully understood. One early theory suggested that the specimen needed time to recover after emptying its venom glands. The amount of venom required to infect a human body is believed to be significant, and researchers assumed the creature might be physically exhausted after biting someone. However, there is currently no evidence supporting that theory. Specimens captured before feeding and specimens captured after feeding show no major difference in strength, movement, or hunting ability. In several tests, a biter that had recently infected a human was still able to attack and kill small animals without difficulty. This suggests the creature is not resting because it needs to recover. The less pleasant explanation is now considered the most likely one. The biter stays because it enjoys watching. We cannot prove that the specimen experiences pleasure in the way a human does. Its face does not change, and it does not produce sounds that could be understood as laughter or excitement. Still, its body responds whenever the bitten person enters a new stage of the condition. Its legs tighten against the ceiling. Its mouthparts move. Its abdomen pulses. In some cases, researchers have observed the specimen slowly rubbing its front limbs together while the infected individual cries out in pain. For lack of a better explanation, we believe the biter feels rewarded by watching the transformation unfold. The first stage of the condition is mostly mental. The bite itself is often small and difficult to notice. 2 puncture wounds may appear somewhere on the arms, legs, neck, or torso. The skin around the bite can become red, but there is usually very little swelling. Most people feel a brief burning sensation. Within minutes, that pain disappears. The mental changes begin soon afterward. The bitten person starts by ignoring the spider's presence. This behavior is not simple confusion. Even when the creature is clearly visible, the infected person refuses to acknowledge it. A specimen may be sitting on the wall only a few feet away. It may be large enough to cover an entire ceiling tile. Its legs may be moving, and its eyes may be fixed on the person. The bitten will still claim that nothing is there. If someone points toward the spider, the infected individual may look directly at it and then look away. What spider? They will ask. Photographs and video recordings do not help. The bitten person can see the creature in a picture, but they will create an immediate explanation for it. They may say it is a shadow, a damaged part of the image, or a joke created by the person showing them the photograph. If shown the bite marks on their own body, they deny being bitten. They may claim the wounds came from a needle, a sharp object, or an ordinary insect. Even when the shape and spacing of the punctures match the specimen's fangs, the infected person refuses to accept the connection. The bitten also becomes protective of the creature. This reaction is often the first clear sign that the venom has affected the brain. If an uninfected person threatens to kill or remove the spider, the bitten may become angry, frightened, or violent. They often position themselves between the specimen and the person trying to harm it. Some beg for the spider's life. Others attack without warning. One infected woman broke 2 of her husband's fingers when he tried to strike the creature with a broom. Afterward, she claimed she had only been protecting herself. When asked why she had defended the spider, she said there had never been a spider in the room. This contradiction does not trouble the bitten. They can protect a creature while also denying that it exists. They can remember the bite while denying that they were bitten. They can feel the venom changing their bodies while insisting that they are completely healthy. The first stage may last anywhere from several hours to 3 days. During this time, the original biter usually remains close. It watches from the ceiling. It does not move unless someone comes close enough to threaten it. When that happens, the creature can travel with shocking speed. It moves across walls and ceilings without making more than a soft scratching sound. Once the threat is past, it returns to its place above the infected person. The second stage is when the physical transformation begins. The earliest changes occur beneath the skin. The bitten often complains of pressure in the face, jaw, spine, and chest. They describe a deep, aching sensation, similar to growing pains, but far more severe. Medical scans show that the bones are beginning to move. The skull changes first. The spaces around the eyes widen. New cavities form above and beside the original eye sockets. The forehead begins to stretch, and the cheekbones are forced outward. The human body is not designed for this change. Bones crack and split before growing into new positions. Small pieces sometimes break loose and move beneath the skin. The sound can be heard from several feet away. At the same time, new ocular structures begin developing behind the face. These structures are not modified human eyes. They are entirely new organs. The number varies between subjects, but most develop between 6 and 10 additional eyes. They begin as small, dark growths beneath the skin before pushing outward. The bitten often feels them moving. They may press their fingers against the swollen areas or scratch at the skin, but they still deny that anything unusual is happening. The jaw also changes. The lower half of the face stretches forward. Human teeth become loose and fall out as the gums pull apart. 2 large fangs grow from the upper jaw. Venom glands begin forming near the throat and extend toward the sides of the face. These glands fill with a clear fluid similar to the venom delivered by the original specimen. The bitten usually complains of pain during this stage. They may cry, shake, or become unable to sleep. However, they do not describe the changes as wrong. A subject can stand in front of a mirror with new eyes pushing through their forehead and still insist that they look normal. During this stage, the infected frequently repeat a single sentence. There is no poison coursing through me. They speak the words without being asked. The sentence appears suddenly in conversations that have nothing to do with the condition. A bitten person may be discussing the weather, food, or their family before stopping and saying, "There is no poison coursing through me." They always use those exact words. This is one of the most disturbing parts of the condition. The sentence does not change to match the bitten person's normal way of speaking. Children use it. People with limited vocabulary use it. Individuals who rarely speak in complete sentences use it. Those who do not normally use the word coursing still say it clearly. The sentence has also been spoken by infected people who did not know English before being bitten. In those cases, they repeat it in their own language, but the meaning and structure remain almost perfectly identical. The venom somehow forces a precise message through every infected mind. This suggests that the venom may contain more than chemicals. It may contain information. It may possess a type of intelligence. Every human brain is different. Memories, language, speech patterns, education, and personality shape how people communicate. Yet, the venom passes through all those differences and produces the same sentence. There is no poison coursing through me. The mechanism behind this has not been understood. Some researchers believe the venom creates a new structure in the brain, one that acts almost like a second mind. Others believe the venom itself is alive and uses the nervous system to speak. There is also a theory that the original biter is somehow controlling the infected person from a distance. This theory is less popular because the sentence continues even after the original biter has left or been killed. Whatever speaks through the bitten does not require the first spider to remain alive. Research into the sentence has produced few answers. Attempts to prevent the infected from speaking have failed. Subjects with their mouths restrained continue trying to form the words. One infected man scratched the sentence into the floor after his jaw had been secured. Another tapped the pattern in code after losing the ability to speak. Even when the brain is heavily damaged, the message remains. The third stage begins when the bitten loses control of their body. By this point, the new eyes have opened. The skin around them is often torn and bleeding. The jaw has extended, and the fangs are fully formed. The spine bends forward, forcing the subject into a low, uneven posture. The hands and feet also begin to change. Fingers lengthen, joints become more flexible, and hard hooks grow beneath the nails. These hooks allow the bitten to climb walls and hold onto ceilings for short periods. During the early part of stage 3, the infected person may still speak normally. They can answer simple questions and recognize people they know. However, their words and actions no longer match. A subject may beg someone to leave the room while their body moves toward that person. They may scream for help while their hands reach out to grab a victim. They may cry and apologize while their fangs prepare to bite. Most of the time, however, they attempt to reassure nearby uninfected people. There is no poison coursing through me, they say. They repeat the sentence again and again. Their voices often remain calm, even when their bodies are twitching violently. They approach slowly at first. They pretend to need help. They may call an uninfected person by name or ask them to come closer. Once the victim is within reach, the bitten attacks. The attack is fast. The transformed individual uses their new limbs to hold the victim down. They bite repeatedly, but unlike the original specimen, they do not always spread the condition. Their venom appears less stable. Some victims become infected. Others simply die. After biting, the stage 3 subject often begins feeding. They prefer soft tissue around the face, throat, and abdomen. The feeding behavior appears automatic. The bitten may continue speaking while eating. In several recordings, subjects repeated the same sentence even with their mouths filled with blood. Rare infected individuals have described hearing a voice during stage 3. The voice comes from inside their head. It repeats one word: bite. The word is spoken rapidly and without pause. Bite, 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 bite. Some subjects describe it as a single voice. Others say thousands of voices speak at once. They claim the command becomes louder when an uninfected person is nearby. The closer the victim gets, the more painful the voice becomes. A few subjects have said that biting someone briefly silences it. Even when the bitten reports this experience, they refuse to connect it to their condition. They may say the voice is caused by stress, lack of sleep, or another person speaking nearby. They still deny being poisoned. They still deny being infected. They still deny that their body is changing. Only a very small number of subjects remain aware enough to understand what they are doing. These are called lucid cases. Lucid cases are not less dangerous. In fact, they may be more dangerous because they can plan, lie, and use familiar memories to bring people close. Most stage 3 subjects, however, appear to exist in an almost constant state of psychosis. They react to movement, smell, heat, and sound. They show little understanding of the world around them. The person they once were remains present only in small pieces. The 4th stage causes severe damage to the mind. The simplest description is that the brain becomes like Swiss cheese. Scans show small, empty spaces appearing throughout the tissue. These spaces spread quickly, destroying memory, language, and personality. The bitten begins behaving like someone with advanced dementia. They forget names. They become lost inside familiar rooms. They repeat questions moments after receiving an answer. Some call for parents who died decades earlier. Others speak to people who are not present. The physical hunting behavior continues. The body can still climb, bite, and feed, even when the human mind can no longer understand where it is. This suggests that the movements are no longer controlled by the original brain. The new nervous structures created by the venom may have taken over. Conversation is sometimes still possible during the early part of stage 4. The infected may respond to their name or remember important events from their past. However, these moments do not last. A subject may recognize their spouse for a few seconds and then attack them. They may remember being human before suddenly asking why they have so few legs. One subject spent nearly an hour speaking about his childhood home. In the middle of a sentence, he stopped, looked toward the ceiling, and asked who had stolen his face. He then began repeating, "There is no poison coursing through me," until his voice failed. By late stage 4, most subjects can no longer communicate clearly. They produce broken words, clicking sounds, and low cries. Their human memories appear almost completely destroyed. The fifth stage brings back a limited amount of awareness. This should not be mistaken for recovery. Nothing at this point can be repaired. The physical changes have spread through almost the entire body, and the human brain is badly damaged. It is believed that the force preventing the bitten from acknowledging the condition becomes weaker during stage 5. The transformation has progressed so far that denial is no longer needed. The subject cannot escape. They cannot seek treatment. They cannot warn anyone in time. Whenever a stage 5 subject believes they are alone, part of the original consciousness appears to return. Hidden cameras have recorded them crying. They complain about pain. They call for help. Some beg to be killed. Their voices are often damaged, but the meaning is clear. One subject repeatedly whispered, "I can feel it moving behind my eyes." Another begged the cameras to tell his wife that he was sorry. A third spent several hours asking someone to burn the building before the thing inside him could come out. These moments suggest the original person remains trapped somewhere inside the transformed body. They are aware enough to understand that something terrible has happened. They can feel their body moving, but they cannot control it. They can watch through their many new eyes, yet they cannot choose where to look. They can feel their own mouth opening and feeding. They can feel the creature growing inside them. All they can do is cry. When an uninfected person enters the area, the subject changes immediately. The human awareness disappears. The body returns to hunting behavior. The bitten becomes quiet, calm, and focused. It hides, follows, and attacks. Once it believes it is alone again, the trapped consciousness returns. This process can happen many times. Some subjects have begged for death one moment and then tried to lure researchers closer the next. It is impossible to know which voice is real. It is also during stage 5 that the original biter loses interest. After watching the transformation for days or weeks, it leaves. The creature simply climbs down from the ceiling and moves away. It does not appear to say goodbye or interact with the infected subject. It abandons them without hesitation. The biter then searches for a new person to infect. This behavior supports the idea that the specimen remains nearby only to watch. Once the transformation is nearly complete, there is nothing left for it to enjoy. The sixth stage is the final stage. It begins with molting. By this point, the infected person no longer resembles a human being. The limbs have lengthened, the spine has split into several flexible sections, and the new organs have fully formed. The body becomes a shell. Movement stops for several hours. The subject often lies on the floor or hangs against the wall. Their breathing becomes slow, and their skin dries. A line then appears along the face and chest. The line opens. The creature growing inside begins forcing its way out. It does not emerge from the mouth or abdomen in the way a parasite normally might. It breaks through the entire front of the body. The new spider uses its legs and fangs to tear open the remains of its human host. The process can take several minutes. During this time, the bitten person may still produce sounds. Whether these sounds are caused by pain or only by air leaving the lungs is unknown. The spider pulls itself free. It carries what remains of the human brain inside its abdomen. The brain tissue becomes part of the creature's inner structure, surrounded by new organs and thick black fluid. The original body is left behind. The face is gone. In its place is a wide, empty cavity stretching from the broken jaw to the upper part of the skull. The chest is torn open, and the limbs remain twisted around the empty shell. The newly grown spider is usually weak for several minutes. Its outer body is soft and pale. As it is exposed to air, the shell darkens and becomes hard. The creature's many eyes open one after another. Soon afterward, it begins to move. It is unclear whether any part of the original bitten person remains alive inside the new spider. The human brain is still present, but it has been changed beyond recognition. Some researchers believe the spider retains the host's memories. Newly emerged specimens have occasionally paused when shown photographs of the host's family. Others have moved toward former homes without being guided. However, this does not prove the human mind survives. The creature may simply be using stored information. It may remember faces and places without understanding what they mean. There is also the possibility that the original person remains fully aware. They may still see through the spider's eyes. They may still hear through its body. They may be trapped inside, unable to speak or control their movements. We have no way to know. Communication attempts have failed. The spider does not respond to names, questions, music, recordings, or familiar voices. It remains hostile at all times. Once its outer shell hardens, it attacks anything that comes close. It does not appear to recognize family members or friends. It does not show mercy. After feeding, the new specimen begins searching for a host. It follows heat, movement, and sound. When it finds a suitable person, it bites. The venom enters the blood. The spider retreats to a nearby ceiling corner. It presses itself flat against the surface. Then it watches. The new victim ignores the bite. They deny that the creature exists. They become angry when someone tries to remove it. Soon, the pain begins. The bones move. New eyes form beneath the skin. Fangs push through the gums. And without being asked, the bitten person smiles through the pain and speaks the same words as every victim before them. There is no poison coursing through me. At that point, the reproduction cycle has begun again. Story 2. Billy spun the cylinder of his old revolver and listened to the soft whirl of metal followed by 6 familiar clicks. To anyone else, it might have sounded like an old weapon in need of oil. To Billy Batts, it was music. It was the sound of order in a world that had become increasingly difficult to understand. He sat alone at the small kitchen table in the middle of his cabin, one hand resting around a half-empty bottle of whiskey. The room smelled of smoke, dust, and damp wood. A weak fire burned in the stove, sending long shadows across the walls whenever the flames shifted. Billy stared at the clock. 11:58. 2 minutes until midnight. 2 minutes until the creature returned. He had been waiting for it all evening. Outside, the desert was silent. The moon hung above the distant hills, pale and round, casting silver light across the dry grass. The wind had died hours earlier. Even the old wooden sign hanging above Billy's porch had stopped creaking. It was too quiet. Billy knew better than to trust quiet nights. Quiet nights were when evil felt most comfortable. He lifted the bottle and took another drink. The whiskey burned down his throat, but Billy barely noticed. He had been drinking the same brand for so long that it tasted more like water than alcohol. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and looked at the revolver. The weapon had once belonged to his father, and before that, according to Billy, it had belonged to a famous outlaw who had killed 17 men in a single afternoon. Nobody had ever found proof of that story. Billy did not care. A good revolver did not need paperwork. It needed bullets. He opened the cylinder, checked the 6 rounds again, then snapped it shut. 11:59. Billy slowly stood. His knees cracked louder than the firewood in the stove. Easy now, he whispered to himself. Old Billy Boy still has plenty of fight left. He reached for the white cowboy hat hanging on the back of his chair. The hat had once been bright and clean, but years of sweat, rain, smoke, and bad decisions had left it gray around the edges. Billy placed it firmly on his head. Then he pulled his coat closed and walked toward the window. The spurs on his boots chimed softly with every step. He did not need to wear spurs inside the house. In fact, Billy did not own a horse and had not ridden one in nearly 20 years. But he believed a man was not truly prepared for battle unless his boots announced his arrival. The clock struck midnight. The first bell echoed through the room. Billy raised the revolver and pointed it toward the dark window. "Here we go," he whispered. "Come on, you foul creature." Old Billy is waiting. The second bell rang. Billy held his breath. The third bell followed. Nothing moved outside. The fourth. The fifth. By the time the clock reached the final bell, Billy's hand had begun shaking. Not from fear, he told himself. From excitement. He leaned closer to the window, squinting into the darkness. "Show yourself." For a moment, there was only silence. Then, from somewhere beyond the porch, came a soft sound. "Meow," Billy fired. The gunshot exploded through the cabin. The window shattered outward, spraying glass across the porch. Smoke drifted from the end of the revolver. Billy stumbled backward and nearly knocked over the whiskey bottle. Ha! He stepped carefully toward the broken window. Cold night air poured into the room. Billy raised the revolver again and looked outside. The porch was empty. The yard was empty. Nothing moved between the old fence posts. Billy grinned. "That's what I thought." He leaned one hand against the window frame and nodded proudly. "Not tonight, foul beast." A second sound came from the darkness. "Meow." Billy spun toward the left side of the porch and fired again. The bullet struck one of the fence posts, sending splinters into the air. "Not tonight, demon," Billy shouted. "You are going back to the hell from which you crawled." The creature answered. "Meow." Billy's eyes widened. He fired again, then twice more. Each shot tore through the darkness. One bullet struck an empty metal bucket near the shed and sent it rolling across the yard. Another hit the porch railing. The final 2 vanished into the night. When the revolver clicked empty, Billy threw himself backward. "Reloading," he shouted. There was nobody around to hear the warning. Billy landed on the wooden floor and rolled behind the kitchen table. His hat fell over one eye. He opened the revolver with shaking hands and reached into his coat pocket for more bullets. 3 slipped through his fingers and rolled beneath the stove. Damn it! He grabbed 6 more and forced them into the cylinder. Outside, something moved. Billy froze. A soft scratching sound came from the porch. Then came the unmistakable sound of paws landing on broken glass. Billy's mouth fell open. "It's coming inside." He snapped the cylinder closed and crawled backward. A dark shape jumped through the broken window. The creature landed somewhere near the kitchen counter. "Meow," Billy fired 3 times. The first bullet shattered a plate on the wall. The second destroyed a glass bottle near the sink. The third struck a cupboard door, which swung open and dropped several cups onto the floor. Billy covered his head as broken crockery crashed around him. Then Everything became silent. Smoke filled the room. The fire in the stove crackled softly. Billy slowly lowered his arms. "Is that all you've got?" he called out. No answer. He stood carefully. A plate fragment fell from his shoulder. Billy brushed it away and raised the gun. "Come out and face me." The room remained still. Billy stepped around the table. His spurs scraped against the floor. He checked behind the chairs. Nothing. He looked beneath the table. Nothing. He leaned toward the open cupboard. Empty. Billy smiled. "Ha ha." His confidence returned. "There is plenty more where that came from, Night Demon." Behind him, a black cat stepped out from beneath the sofa. The cat was small, with smooth, dark fur and bright yellow eyes. A thin leather collar circled its neck. It moved across the floor without making a sound. Billy continued searching the room. The cat followed him. Billy checked behind the curtains. The cat sat directly behind his boots. Billy turned around. He did not see it. He looked toward the hallway. The cat stood and stretched. Billy lowered his revolver slightly. "Maybe I wounded it." The cat walked closer. Billy rubbed his beard. Could be hiding in the walls. The cat sat beside his leg. Then it looked up at him and opened its mouth. "Meow," Billy screamed. He jumped so violently that both feet left the floor. His revolver fired once into the ceiling. The cat jumped back. Billy fired again. The second bullet struck the floor. "Yah." Billy turned and ran. He knocked over the kitchen table, sending the whiskey bottle sliding across the boards. The bottle somehow remained unbroken. Billy did not stop to save it. He rushed into the hallway, nearly falling when one spur caught the edge of a rug. Behind him, the cat followed at an easy pace. Billy grabbed the railing and pulled himself up the narrow staircase. His lungs burned by the time he reached the second floor. The cabin only had one bedroom, and Billy threw himself through the door as if an army were behind him. He slammed it shut. Then he pushed a wooden chair beneath the handle. That should hold you. From the hallway came a soft scratching sound. Billy backed toward the bed. He still had 3 bullets left. At least, he believed he did. In the confusion, it was difficult to remember how many times he had fired. He climbed onto the bed without removing his boots and wrapped himself in the thick blanket. Only his hat and revolver remained visible. Billy pointed the gun toward the door. His hands shook. The scratching stopped. Billy listened. The house became silent again. A cold wind moved through the broken window downstairs. Somewhere below, a cupboard door creaked. Billy tried to steady his breathing. "You stay out there," he warned. No answer. "I mean it." The silence continued. Billy adjusted his grip on the revolver. He had survived many dangerous things in his life. At least, that was how he remembered it. He had once fought 3 men outside a bar in New Mexico. In reality, 2 of the men had been trying to help him stand after he fell into a water trough, but Billy preferred his version. He had been chased by wolves across the mountains. According to the local sheriff, they had been farm dogs. Billy had survived a train robbery, although the train had actually been delayed because of mechanical trouble. Still, Billy believed experience mattered more than details. He stared at the bedroom door. The chair moved, only slightly. Billy's finger tightened around the trigger. The handle turned. The chair slid across the floor with a slow scrape. Billy's eyes widened. No ordinary creature could do that. The door opened. A dark shape entered the room. Billy pulled the blanket higher. The black cat walked past the chair. It stepped into the moonlight coming through the bedroom window and sat near the foot of the bed. Billy stared at it. The cat stared back. For several seconds, neither moved. Then the cat jumped onto the bed. Billy gasped. It landed directly in front of him. Its yellow eyes reflected the moonlight. Billy aimed the revolver between them. "I warned you." The cat tilted its head. Billy smiled nervously. "Now you face the judgment of Billy Bats." He pulled the trigger. Click. Billy blinked. He pulled it again. Click what? He pulled the trigger several more times. Click, 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 come on. Click, the cylinder was empty. Billy stared at the revolver in disbelief. That's impossible. The cat took one step closer. Billy threw the gun. Fine. The revolver flew past the cat by several feet, struck the wall, and landed inside a laundry basket. Billy fell back against the pillow. He closed his eyes. Do your worst. The cat walked onto his stomach. Billy remained still. The cat climbed onto his chest. Its paws pressed against his coat. Billy held his breath and waited for claws, teeth, fire, or whatever other terrible weapon the creature planned to use. Instead, the cat turned in a small circle. Then, it lay down. A deep, steady purr filled the room. Billy slowly opened one eye. The cat's eyes were closed. It rested comfortably on his chest as if it had been sleeping there every night of its life. Billy stared at it. The cat continued purring. "You're trying to trick me." The cat did not move. Billy opened his other eye. He lifted one hand carefully and held it above the animal. The cat's ear twitched. Billy lowered his hand and touched the top of its head. The fur was soft. The cat pushed its face against his fingers. Billy frowned. That is exactly what a demon would do. The cat purred louder. Billy scratched beneath its chin. Its paws relaxed against his coat. The old man looked toward the bedroom door. No other creatures entered. No flames appeared. The cat did not transform into a monster. It simply slept. Billy felt his heartbeat slowly returning to normal. He studied the animal more closely. The cat was thin, but not starving. Its left ear had a small cut near the tip. Around its neck was a red collar, and a tiny silver tag hung beneath its chin. Billy gently lifted the tag. A name had been scratched into the metal. Mittens, Billy sighed. "So that's who you are." The cat opened one eye. "Miss Mittens?" The eye closed again. Billy leaned back into the pillow. "You caused a lot of trouble tonight." Mr. Mittens continued purring. Billy looked toward the empty revolver in the laundry basket. "You made me waste 12 good bullets." The cat did not apologize. "You broke my window." Mr. Mittens stretched one paw. Billy paused. "Technically, I suppose I broke the window." The cat's tail moved once. Billy yawned. The adrenaline began leaving his body, making every muscle feel heavy. He had been awake since sunrise, preparing for the midnight attack. For the last 3 nights, he had heard the same mysterious sound outside the house. Now, the first night, it had come from beneath the porch. The second night, from beside the shed. Billy had spent the following day studying an old book about supernatural creatures. He found nothing about cats, but he did find a page describing demons that copied the sounds of harmless animals. That had been enough. Billy boarded the windows, cleaned his revolver, and prepared for battle. Now the supposed demon slept peacefully on his chest. Billy scratched behind the cat's ear. Mr. Mittens pushed his head into the old man's hand. "You are an ugly little beast." The the cat purred. And dangerous. The purring grew louder. Billy smiled, despite himself. He had lived alone in the cabin for almost 15 years. His wife had died many years earlier. His children lived in different states and rarely visited. Most of his old friends were gone. The silence of the cabin had slowly become heavier. Billy filled it with music, arguments with the radio, and stories he told himself. Sometimes, after drinking too much whiskey, he spoke to the clock. The clock never answered. Mr. Mittens shifted closer to Billy's neck. The warmth of the small body surprised him. The bedroom was cold, especially with the broken window downstairs allowing winter air into the house, but the cat's steady heat made the blanket feel warmer. Billy's eyes began to close. You understand this doesn't make us friends. Mister, Mittens purred. This is a temporary ceasefire. The cat placed one paw against Billy's beard. Billy gently moved it away. We will discuss the rules tomorrow. The animal remained asleep. No scratching the furniture. Purr, no climbing on the kitchen counter. Purr, and you stay away from my whiskey. Mister, Mittens opened one eye again. Billy narrowed his eyes. I mean it. The cat closed its eye. Billy smiled. For the first time in several nights, the cabin did not feel empty. He could still hear the wind moving through the broken window. Cold air passed beneath the bedroom door. Somewhere downstairs, a damaged plate finally slipped from the cupboard and shattered. Billy jumped slightly. Mister, Mittens did not move. Billy looked toward the door. Then he looked at the sleeping cat. You heard that, didn't you? Mister, Mittens remained calm. Billy pulled the blanket higher around both of them. If another demon comes in, you handle it. The cat's purring continued. Billy closed his eyes. The revolver was empty. The kitchen was destroyed. There were bullet holes in the floor, ceiling, cupboard, walls, and probably several parts of the porch. The front window was gone. Tomorrow, Billy would have to explain everything to the sheriff. He would tell the truth. A dangerous creature had entered his home at midnight. A terrible battle had followed. The beast had eventually surrendered. Billy smiled at the thought. Nobody needed to know the beast weighed less than 10 pounds. As sleep began to take him, Mittens lifted his head and looked toward the dark doorway. His yellow eyes opened wide. For a moment, the cat became completely still. Something moved downstairs. Not the wind. Not the broken cupboard. A slow, heavy step crossed the kitchen floor. Then another. Mister, Mittens' ears turned forward. A low growl formed in his throat. Billy opened one tired eye. What is it? The cat stared at the hallway. From downstairs came a deep scraping sound. Billy listened. The sound moved closer to the staircase. He looked toward the laundry basket where his empty revolver had landed. Then he looked at Mr. Mittens. The cat's fur stood up along its back. Billy swallowed. So there was a monster. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. Billy pulled the blanket over his head. Mr. Mittens remained on his chest, growling at the open doorway. Billy closed his eyes and whispered, You win this round, mister. Mittens, the footsteps stopped. Silence filled the house. After a long moment, Mittens relaxed. The cat lowered its head and began purring again. Billy slowly uncovered his face. Nothing stood in the doorway. Nothing moved in the hall. Maybe the sound had only been the old house settling. Maybe it had been the wind. Or maybe something had looked up the staircase, seen Mr. Mittens waiting in the dark, and decided old Billy Bats was not worth the trouble. Billy placed one hand gently on the cat's back. "Good boy," he whispered. Mr. Mittens closed his eyes. Billy did the same. Within minutes, the old cowboy was snoring. The black cat slept on his chest until morning, guarding the house from demons, mice, shadows, and anything else foolish enough to disturb them. Story 3. Ever since my life began falling apart, people have kept telling me that I need help. They said I should speak to a therapist. They said I should take time away from work, get proper sleep, and stop letting stress build up inside me. They said the things frightening me were probably the result of exhaustion, anxiety, and an overworked mind. Therapy is not very useful, though, when everyone believes the thing making you sick exists only inside your head. Talking about it has not helped. Maybe writing it down will. I am stuck in this hospital bed anyway, and I have plenty of time. Besides, I could not ignore the irony of ending up here after everything that happened. Years ago, when I was still an aimless teenager, I decided I needed a job. I had no plan for my future and no real ambitions. I only knew that having money would allow me to continue wasting my life more comfortably. Finding work was harder than I expected. I applied to shops, restaurants, warehouses, and offices, but almost no one wanted to hire someone my age with no experience. The only place that accepted me was a hospital. Not just any hospital, either. It was the largest hospital in the city and the same one where I had been born. At the time, I thought that was meaningful. It felt like my life had come full circle. The hospital had helped bring me into the world, and now I would help take care of it. I was young enough to find that idea inspiring. The city was not one of those ancient European places filled with castles and narrow stone streets, but the hospital looked as though it belonged in one. The oldest parts of the building had tall windows, heavy doors, stone arches, and long corridors with high ceilings. It looked like a place where vampires might live if someone painted the walls white and added fluorescent lights. The hospital had been expanded many times over the years. New sections had been attached to old ones. Corridors changed style without warning. You could walk from a modern hallway with clean glass walls into another area where the floorboards creaked and the pipes rattled behind cracked plaster. It was easy to get lost. Despite the building's strange appearance, I enjoyed working there. I liked speaking to patients. I liked helping visitors find their way. I liked the feeling that I was doing something useful, even when the work itself involved carrying boxes, cleaning rooms, and moving equipment from one part of the hospital to another. Some patients could not be helped very much. That was difficult to accept, but it was part of the job. The managers seemed to like me too. They gave me more responsibility quickly and later offered to help pay for my education so I could qualify as a nurse. They did not have many men applying for nursing positions, especially in the psychiatric wing, and they were eager to train someone willing to work there. I accepted. At first, working in the psychiatric wing seemed easier than I had expected. Most of my job involved handing out medication, checking rooms, helping patients eat, and listening to the occasional strange conversation. The rest of the team was older than me. Most were in their 30s or 40s. They were friendly and patient while I learned the work. The doctors warned us not to encourage the patient's delusions. If someone claimed invisible people were watching them, we were not supposed to agree. If someone said the government had installed a machine in their skull, we were meant to acknowledge their fear without pretending the story was true. The doctors were not present all day. However, the nurses and support workers often ignored that rule. Sometimes they joked with patients about the things they claimed to see. Sometimes they answered questions as though the imaginary people or creatures were real. I joined in too. I never understood why the experienced staff did it. At the time, I assumed it was simply their way of making the long shifts more entertaining. Every few days, someone would send me on an errand through another part of the hospital. I thought the managers wanted me to learn the layout while still being useful. During those trips, visitors often stopped me to ask for information. They were searching for relatives, wards, doctors, or departments I had never heard of. Most of the time, I directed them towards the main information desk. Strangely, many of them did not go. They would look disappointed, mutter something, and walk away. I assumed they had changed their minds. Perhaps they were afraid of finding out that someone they loved was suffering or had died. The hospital was always noisy. You could hear patients shouting, families crying, wheels moving across the floors, and stretchers being rushed towards the emergency department. Alarms rang without warning. Doors opened and closed at every hour. There was almost never true silence. One afternoon, I returned to the psychiatric wing after delivering supplies. The head nurse called me over and handed me a folder full of papers. "These need to go to the 5th floor," she said, "right away." The 5th floor was newer than most of the building. It was mainly used for surgery and specialized treatment. Normally, you needed to use a separate elevator to reach it. One of my coworkers laughed from behind the desk. "The new guy should take them," he said. "And remember to use the stairs. The elevator is broken." The papers were urgent, and no one else volunteered. I knew they were making me do it because I was the youngest employee there. The route began through an old corridor I had never used. At the end was a set of stairs behind a temporary barrier. The area looked closed, but there was enough space to walk around the barrier. The walls smelled damp, and dark stains had spread across the ceiling. Old hospital. Old pipes. Mold, that was what I told myself. I had to stop several people and ask for directions. Some seemed genuinely surprised when I said I was looking for the 5th floor stairs. One cleaner stared at me for a moment before pointing down the corridor. "You can go that way," she said. Her tone made it sound as though she did not recommend it. The stairs were narrow and seemed to continue forever. They turned at each landing, climbing through parts of the hospital that felt increasingly empty. When I reached the 4th floor, I saw a well-dressed woman standing near the stairs. She wore a dark coat, a neat skirt, and high heels. Her hair was carefully styled, and she looked as though she had come directly from an office. She stepped in front of me. "How is my father?" she asked. "I'm sorry," I said. "I don't work on this floor. You should ask at the nurse's station." Before I could finish, she gave an angry sigh. "No one wants to work in this hospital," she said. Then she walked past me and continued down the stairs. The 4th floor was unusually quiet. The corridor lights were on, but I did not see any staff or patients. Several doors were closed. Others stood partly open, revealing dark rooms. I assumed the woman was right. Perhaps the department was short-staffed. I continued climbing. When I finally reached the 5th floor, I was sweating and breathing heavily. A woman behind the reception desk accepted the papers. As I turned to leave, she looked at me strangely. "You took the stairs?" "Yes, the elevator is broken." She frowned. "Do not go back down that way. Use the old service elevator at the rear." It would have been useful to know about that elevator before climbing 5 floors. At the time, I did not think there was anything strange about her warning. I was too busy being angry at my coworkers for turning the delivery into a test of my fitness. The service elevator was slow and smelled of oil, but it took me back to the ground floor without any trouble. When I returned to the psychiatric wing, no one mentioned the errand. I must have looked furious, because the joke seemed to stop being funny the moment they saw me. "Why didn't anyone tell me about the service elevator?" I asked. "Were you hoping I would collapse on the way down?" They laughed, but no one gave me a proper answer. For the next few weeks, no one sent me back to the stairs. I was grateful. I had also become tired of answering visitors who asked me the same questions whenever I passed through the main hall. There was a giant sign pointing towards the information desk. I could never understand why they ignored it. The psychiatric wing was usually quiet at night, because most patients had taken their medication and gone to sleep. The staff joked that the hardest part of the night shift was arriving at work. One evening, a patient overheard us talking and announced that he planned to scare the night nurse so she would have something to do. We laughed because I was holding his sleeping medication at that exact moment. There would be no scare. At the end of that shift, I was preparing to greet the night team and go home when the head nurse told me one of them had called in sick. Someone needed to stay. The others clearly did not want the extra hours, so I accepted. I was young and liked the idea of extra pay. For the first few hours, the joke seemed accurate. The work was easy. Most patients were asleep. I ate my lunch, watched a few fights on my phone, and thought I might request more night shifts in the future. Around 2 in the morning, exhaustion finally reached me. I was not used to staying awake that late. Outside the wing, I could still hear faint movement from the rest of the hospital. Wheels passed somewhere in the distance. Doors closed. A voice occasionally echoed through another corridor. Inside our wing, there was only the ticking of a large clock and the long white walls designed to look harmless and calming. The walls almost seemed soft. I leaned against one and closed my eyes. I did not fully fall asleep. I only had a few long blinks. During one of them, I saw a patient walking down the corridor. He was completely naked, except for a blanket hanging over one shoulder. I recognized him immediately. He was the man who had joked about frightening the night nurse. He must have hidden his pills under his tongue and spat them out later. I called his name. He did not respond. He continued walking towards the corner at the end of the corridor. I followed him because he was under my care and clearly unwell. When I reached him, I placed one hand on his shoulder. He spun around. His face looked wrong. His mouth was open, but I did not hear him breathing. Before I could speak, he pushed me as hard as he could. I fell backwards and landed painfully on the floor. The man ran around the corner. I got up and followed. There was no one there. The corridor ended at a locked door. There was nowhere else he could have gone. The noise had woken several patients. When I returned to the main hall, I saw the man who had pushed me standing at the opposite end of the corridor. He was wearing his hospital clothes and looked half asleep from the medication. He had only just come out of his room. I stood there, staring at him. He stared back, confused. I checked his room later. His blanket was still on the bed. His medication cup was empty. When I told the head nurse what had happened, she laughed. "You'll get used to it, honey," she said. I decided I must have fallen asleep standing up. Maybe I had dreamed the whole thing. For all the good days and funny moments I experienced in the psychiatric wing, one thing became clear. I did not want to become the young nurse mentioned on the late-night news after being brutally killed by a violent patient. I requested a transfer to the general ward. On my first day there, I began to wonder whether being murdered by a patient would have been easier. The workload was overwhelming. There were more patients, more medication, more paperwork, and more emergencies. For the first time, I came face to face with how weak the human body truly was. I watched diseases slowly consume people. I watched families struggle to remain hopeful, while doctors explained that nothing more could be done. It was very different from joking with patients in the psychiatric wing. One afternoon, I entered a room to care for an elderly woman. She jumped when she saw me. "I'm sorry," I said. "I didn't mean to frighten you." She laughed. "I thought you were an angel coming to take me." I was confident about my appearance, but not confident enough to believe I looked like an angel. Later, I told one of my coworkers what the woman had said. I expected her to laugh. She did not. "Poor thing," she replied. The old woman died the following day. Patients sometimes seemed to know death was approaching before anyone else did. There was something called a terminal surge. A dying patient might suddenly become energetic. Someone who had barely eaten for weeks could ask for a full meal. A person who had been too weak to speak might sit up and talk clearly. Some even stood and walked. Families who understood what it meant became frightened. Those who did not understand believed their loved one was recovering. Both reactions were heartbreaking. Some patients claimed to see angels. Others said the Grim Reaper had entered the room. We actually had our own version of the Grim Reaper working at the hospital. He was an old doctor who seemed ancient enough to have helped construct the building. He moved slowly, spoke very little, and somehow survived every complaint made against him. Whenever he completed his rounds, an unusually high number of patients died. I could never decide whether he was dangerously incompetent or intentionally freeing beds for new patients. Either way, I did not understand how he continued working there. Night shifts in the general ward were usually manageable because fewer procedures were scheduled. However, if something went wrong, there were also fewer staff members available to help. When a patient died, a special team normally cleaned and prepared the body before taking it to the morgue. Every death was meant to be examined and documented. One busy night, the day team had not finished preparing a man who died during the afternoon. The responsibility fell to me. Preparing a body was not technically difficult. You cleaned it, closed the eyes, removed certain equipment, and placed it inside a bag. The difficult part was mental. A few minutes earlier, the person had been someone. Now everyone expected you to treat the body like an object. I had not learned how to make that change inside my head. Still, it was my job. I prepared the man as carefully as I could, closed the body bag, placed him on a stretcher, and took him down to the morgue. Only one employee was working there. For such a large hospital, management seemed determined to save money whenever possible. "Busy night?" the morgue worker asked. "Did the Reaper come through?" "Yes," I said. About that doctor, he interrupted me. "Thanks for bringing the body down. I can't leave this place unattended, so it would have taken a while for someone to collect him. I don't like keeping them waiting." I looked at the black bag. "Sure, no problem. It was my first time preparing one. I hope everything is correct. Don't worry, I'll handle it from here." A few days later, a disturbing rumor spread through the hospital. A man had supposedly been declared dead and taken to the morgue. When workers later opened the body bag, they found scratches on the inside. The story claimed he had regained consciousness and tried to escape. Someone called it the Lazarus effect. a rare event in which a person's heart begins beating again after resuscitation efforts have stopped. Hospitals were full of gossip. People exaggerated everything. I tried not to believe it. Still, I kept thinking about the man I had taken to the morgue. I imagined him waking inside the darkness. I imagined him trying to move his arms and discovering that the bag was sealed. I imagined his fingernails tearing against the plastic while he slowly ran out of air. What if the old doctor had declared him dead too early? What if some medication had slowed his heart enough to fool everyone? What if I had helped suffocate a living man? I told myself the morgue worker would have checked him. He seemed more responsible than the doctor. That thought was the only thing that allowed me to continue working. I began thinking that perhaps I really did need therapy. Although I did not want to return to the psychiatric wing, I missed my original coworkers. They were cruel sometimes, but so was I. We met in the break room whenever our shifts overlapped. They told stories about the patients and joked about the ones who always returned. It was sad how mental illness could hold someone so tightly that the hospital became a permanent part of their life. Still, I thought it was better than dying. Hospital work was not easy. The hours were long. The stress was constant. Death became so common that some workers stopped reacting to it. Many employees did not stay long. They transferred to other hospitals, hoping a different building would give them a fresh start. After nearly a year, I began considering the same thing. Then I overheard two employees discussing new plans for the hospital. "Did you hear?" one asked. "Management is finally gutting the fourth floor. I heard they're turning it into a memorial." I had become so busy that I rarely left my ward. I no longer knew what was happening elsewhere in the building. "Why would they remove an entire floor?" I asked. They looked at me. "Because of the gas leak," one said. 3 people died there, and several others became seriously ill. "What gas leak?" "The one from years ago." The other employee lowered his voice. "And there was that woman before it happened." None of it made sense. I had worked in the hospital for almost a full year. Surely I would have heard about a disaster that killed 3 people. It would have been in newspapers or on local television. More importantly, I had seen people on the 4th floor only months earlier. I had spoken to a woman there. I remembered the lights, the closed rooms, and the quiet corridor. I knew what I had seen. At least, I thought I did. I needed to look. I took the elevator from the ground floor. The button for the 4th floor did nothing. The elevator passed it and opened on the 5th. The receptionist was sitting behind the same desk. She looked surprised when she saw me. Then she noticed where I was looking. My eyes were fixed on the corridor leading towards the old stairs. She stood quickly. "Don't go," I ran. I pushed through the door and hurried down the first flight of stairs. When I reached the next landing, I stopped. The well-dressed woman was there. She was lying at the bottom of the stairs. Blood covered the wall behind her head. Her neck was twisted at an impossible angle, and both heels of her shoes had snapped. Her face was turned towards me. Her eyes were open. She had not walked away after speaking to me that day. I had been unlucky enough to see where she always ended up. I had no training for something like that. No medical tool or hospital procedure could help me understand a dead woman repeating the final moments of her life. I turned and ran back upstairs. By the time I reached the 5th floor, my heart was pounding so violently that I thought I might collapse. The receptionist tried to speak to me. All I could say was, I don't think those people are my friends. Then everything went dark. I woke several hours later in a hospital bed. The staff said I had arrived on the 5th floor, shouting about a dead woman on the stairs. They believed I had suffered from burnout and a severe mental breakdown. Apparently, I punched a staff member while trying to leave. Security had to restrain me. Because I was considered a danger to myself and others, I was transferred back to the psychiatric wing. This time, I was not an employee. I was a patient. At least I finally received the therapy everyone said I needed. It felt very different from this side. The doctors encouraged me to speak about everything and get it off my chest, but no one truly wanted to listen. I remembered the rule about never encouraging a patient's delusions. They were following it carefully with me. Most of the old team was gone. New hospital management had replaced many workers during the renovations. They wanted to remove the depressing, old-fashioned appearance and create something bright and modern. There had been many layoffs. At least, that was what I heard. One thing management could not remove was the religious history of the hospital. There were statues, prayers, religious names, and sacred objects throughout the building. Removing them would have angered the Catholic Church, many local residents, and possibly God himself. Priests and nuns continued visiting patients. They usually came when someone was seriously ill. Pneumonia could be dangerous for children and elderly people, so religious visitors often prayed beside those patients. When medicine had done everything possible, families sometimes wanted to try faith too. One afternoon, an old priest visited me. I recognized him immediately. He had prayed beside my bed when I was a child. I had been admitted to the same hospital with pneumonia more than 10 years earlier. This time, I was old enough to speak with him. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "I'm fine, Father. How are you?" "As well as God allows." "That's good. I'm glad you survived your illness all those years ago," he said. "Although I am sorry to find you here again. I'm sure you will recover, just as you did before." "Thank you, Father. I hope you're right." "I'll keep you in my prayers, son." It was strange how clearly I remembered him. I had been very young during his first visit, yet his face remained in my memory. The stranger thing was that he looked exactly the same. Not older, not weaker, exactly the same. I suppose even death cannot prevent a devoted man from completing his duties. I have been a patient here for quite a while now. The doctors say my mind is still not stable enough for me to leave. They do not believe everything I tell them, but they believe enough to keep me medicated. Some of the pills help me sleep. Others make it difficult to think. The doctors visit with the same questions. Are you sleeping? Are you eating? Are you taking your medication? As if I have a choice. One question continued bothering them. Are you still hearing voices? I have never heard anything that wasn't there, I said. The night team says you sometimes speak when no one else is in your room. I talk to the 5 night shift workers when the noise outside keeps me awake. I don't hear voices inside my head. The doctor looked down at his notes. Then he looked at me. There are only 4 people working the night shift. I did not answer him. I am still learning new things about this hospital. Story 4. At least, that was how I had always felt. For as long as I could remember, there had been a distance between me and everyone else. It was not the kind of distance you could measure with streets, miles, or empty rooms. It was something quieter and harder to explain. I could stand beside a group of people and still feel as though they were far away, speaking through thick glass. Other people seemed to understand life in a way I never had. They laughed without forcing it. They went out with friends, fell in love, got married, and started families. They made plans for weekends and holidays. They complained about their jobs, saved money, bought homes, and worried about the future. I watched them do all of it, but I never felt part of it. I could not even remember the last time I had slept properly. Night after night, I would lie awake and listen to the city moving around me. Cars passed on distant roads, pipes knocked inside old buildings. Somewhere, dogs barked, people argued, and music played behind closed windows. I often wondered how many people were awake at the same time as me. Maybe hundreds, maybe thousands. Still, I felt completely alone. Feeling that way seemed to feed itself. Once you started believing you were an outsider, you behaved like one. You stayed quiet. You stood at the edge of rooms. You avoided looking people in the eye because you expected them to look away first. Then people did leave you outside. It became a circle. I did not know where it started. Perhaps something had always been wrong with me. Maybe people noticed it before I did. Maybe there was something in my face, my voice, or the way I stood that told them I did not belong. I had once heard that talking about your feelings helped. If that were true, I should have been the happiest man alive. I talked to myself constantly. Sometimes I spoke inside my head. Other times the words came out without me noticing. I would walk through the streets and carry on full conversations with myself. I asked questions and answered them. I made jokes no one heard. I argued with people who were not there. It was not madness, at least I did not think it was. It was simply what happened when no one else listened. When you went through life without friends, without invitations, without even the occasional greeting, you began to think something had been wrong with you from the beginning. But if it had always been there, was it really wrong? Or was it only part of how I had been made? I could never decide. Part of me wanted someone to confirm it. I wanted a person to look at me and say that yes, there was something unusual about me, but it did not make me worthless. Another part of me was terrified of hearing the truth. Not knowing was painful. Knowing might have been worse. My life did not change much as the years went by. I found work where everyone else found work. I stood in lines, filled out forms, and took whatever jobs were offered. I spent time in warehouses, shops, offices, and factories. I cannot remember many details now. The places blend together in my mind. I worked because that was what people did. None of it felt important. I would arrive, complete whatever task I had been given, and leave. No one depended on me. No one seemed to notice whether I did well or badly. Sometimes I wondered whether the work would continue exactly the same if I simply stopped showing up. I never cared much about money. People spent their entire lives chasing it. They traded their time, health, and happiness for bigger houses, newer cars, and clothes they replaced the following year. None of that interested me. I had the clothes on my body, and they were enough. I kept the same coat because it was warm. I wore the same shoes because they still carried me where I needed to go. People looked at me strangely sometimes, but they already did that anyway. The city changed constantly. Old buildings disappeared. New ones rose in their place. Shops changed names. Streets became wider, then narrower again. People tore things down and built other things that looked almost the same. I had seen it happen before. People liked to believe they were moving forward. They seemed afraid of stillness, as if stopping for a moment might force them to think about where they were going. I often heard that nature was good for people who felt sad or lost. So I began visiting the beach. I went there more often than anywhere else. The beach changed less than the city. The buildings near it came and went, and people filled the shore during warm months, but the sea remained. It moved in and out, washing away footprints before anyone could become too proud of leaving them. During the day, families covered the sand. Children ran toward the water, then screamed and hurried back when the waves reached their feet. Couples walked slowly along the shore. People carried colorful umbrellas, chairs, bags, and food. I usually kept my distance. Nights were better. After dark, the beach emptied. The wind became colder, and the sea looked black beneath the sky. I would walk near the water and listen to the waves. Sometimes I spoke aloud. The ocean never answered, but it did not ignore me either. It simply continued moving. If being close to nature truly healed people, I was not the one who could prove it. I never felt healed. I only felt less visible there, and sometimes that was enough. The thought that I still had my mother made things easier. She was the one person I believed might understand what I was going through. She had been present for every part of my life. She knew what I had been like as a child. She had seen me struggle, fail, withdraw, and try again. She had always been there. As she grew older, she went out less. She spent more time inside her home, sitting near the window or listening to the radio. I visited when I could. At least, I believed I did. Time was strange around her house. Sometimes I felt as though I had seen her the day before, only to discover that months had passed. With every visit, she looked a little older. Her shoulders became smaller. Her hands shook more. The lines around her eyes grew deeper. I worried that my sadness had made her worse. Mothers carried their children's pain, even when they were too old to carry anything else. I began thinking that perhaps I should stop visiting her. Maybe seeing me only reopened old wounds. At first, I fought my loneliness with everything I had. I attended events around the city and pretended I belonged. Feeling normal seemed more important than actually being normal. I went to local fairs. They were loud and crowded. Music played from old speakers. Children chased one another between stalls, and the air smelled of fried food and sugar. I never bought much. Sometimes I reached into my pockets and found them empty. I never knew where my money went. I assumed I had left it at my mother's house or lost it somewhere along the way. At the fairs, I walked slowly and stopped near groups of people. I laughed when they laughed, even when I did not know what was funny. I watched games and listened to performers. No one seemed to realize I was alone. Or perhaps they realized and did not care. Maybe that was the point. Once I attended a wedding without being invited. I had seen people entering a church dressed in formal clothes, so I followed them inside. The women wore long dresses, and the men wore dark suits. I had always thought wedding clothes looked uncomfortable, but everyone seemed pleased with them. I stood at the back during the ceremony. The bride and groom held hands. They promised to stay together through illness, poverty, age, and death. People cried when they heard it. I wondered how anyone could make a promise that large. Afterward, there was a party in a hall beside the church. Music played, glasses touched, and people laughed as if happiness could be made louder by sharing it. I liked that event more than most. A man who had helped lead the ceremony came over and spoke to me. It had been so long since anyone had approached me that my voice barely worked. He asked how I was doing. I told him I was fine. That was what people were supposed to say. He asked whether I planned to stay for the rest of the celebration. I said I was not sure. Then he asked whether I had ever visited his church before. I told him I had not. He smiled and said I should come one Sunday. I had heard religious people often tried to convert lonely people, so I said maybe he did not pressure me. Instead, he suggested that I stay longer and try speaking with some of the guests. He told me that people were often kinder than we expected if we gave them a chance. I thanked him. The conversation had already become too much. I left before anyone else could speak to me. For several days afterward, I thought about returning to the church. I never did. Museums were another place where I could spend time without being questioned. Every time I visited, there seemed to be a new exhibition. Paintings disappeared and were replaced by statues, old tools, weapons, furniture, or photographs. I never understood how the staff kept up with it. Most of the workers were young. They stood behind desks, looking tired and bored, probably wishing they had chosen an easier way to earn money. Since I was often the only visitor in certain rooms, I tried to make their work easier by keeping to myself. I liked looking at old paintings most. People dressed better in them. Their coats were longer, their shirts were carefully made, and even ordinary clothing looked elegant. Modern styles changed too quickly. People seemed determined not to look the way they had looked a month earlier. I preferred the clothes I already had. They fit me. At least they used to. Sometimes I noticed that my sleeves appeared wet in museum glass, though they felt dry when I touched them. I blamed the lighting. Museums often use strange lights to protect the displays. The cinema was also popular, so I visited from time to time. When films became more common, the theaters grew larger. There were rows and rows of seats, huge screens, and bright signs outside. It was another place where I could blend in. Most people arrived with friends or partners. They bought food and whispered while waiting for the film to begin. I would get a ticket and sit near the front, where fewer people gathered. There were usually enough people nearby to make me feel included, but not enough to notice I was alone. The stories rarely made sense to me. I did not understand why people became so emotional over characters who did not exist. But I was not there for the films. I was there to sit in a room with others and pretend we were sharing something. The actors' names became harder to pronounce over the years. They came from countries I had barely heard of. I hoped those places treated people like me more kindly. There was one kind of gathering I avoided. Funerals. They were too sad. People gathered because someone they loved had disappeared from their lives. They cried, prayed, shared memories, and stood near a body they would never speak to again. I respected their grief too much to intrude. I sometimes wondered whether anyone would cry when I was gone. I hoped someone would, not for too long. They should cry a little, then return to their lives. I was lonely, not unreasonable. Every day began to feel like the last one. A person could only continue for so long on willpower alone. I had carried the same sadness for years, and it had become heavier rather than lighter. I did not want to place that burden on anyone, especially not my mother. But who else would listen? The walk to her home was difficult that final day. The sky was gray, and the streets seemed quieter than usual. I passed familiar buildings, though some looked different from the way I remembered them. A shop that had once sold bread was now a pharmacy. A row of houses had been replaced by apartments. Trees I remembered as small had grown tall enough to cover the road in shadow. I could not remember when all those changes had happened. My mother's house stood at the end of a narrow street. The paint had faded, and the garden was overgrown. I remembered helping her plant flowers there when I was young. Now most of them were gone. I stood outside for a long time. I knew how the conversation would go. She had always been a good woman. If anyone had failed, it was me. What other choice did I have? I could not see one anymore. I entered the house. My mother sat in her usual chair beside the window. She looked toward me with the same expression she always wore when I visited. She was happy to see me, but she was also sad because nothing had changed. "It's been a while," she said. I apologized. She told me it was all right, though I could see that it was not. We spoke about her health and the house. She complained about the cold and said the roof needed work. She told me my younger brother visited almost every day and helped with shopping and cleaning. He had always been the more responsible one. He knew I could not offer much help anymore. My brother's health had begun to fail too. My mother told me he became tired easily and had trouble with his heart. I knew it was a terrible thought, but I felt relieved that she would probably die before him. Parents were not supposed to bury their children. That was the natural order of life. Even thinking about it made me feel cruel. We sat quietly for a while. A clock ticked on the wall. I noticed there were new photographs on the table beside her. One showed my brother with gray hair. Another showed children I did not recognize. "Who are they?" I asked. She did not answer. Perhaps she had not heard me. When the time finally came, I spoke plainly. I told her I could not continue. I told her I had spent an entire life standing outside of everything. I had watched other people live while feeling as though I had been forgotten. I told her I was tired, not the kind of tired that sleep could fix, a deeper tiredness, the kind that settled into the bones and stayed there. My mother listened without interrupting. At first, she took it better than I expected. She told me she loved me. She said she understood why I felt the way I did. Then she began to cry. She reached toward me, though her hand stopped before touching mine. "Please," she whispered. I looked away. "I'm sorry. You don't have to do this. I do." "No," her voice broke. "All I can do is ask you not to." "I've tried, Mom. I know. I don't belong anywhere." She covered her mouth with one shaking hand. I stood. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. There was fear in it, not fear of what I might do, fear of something she remembered. "I can't bear to see you die a second time, son." For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood her. The room became completely silent. "What did you say?" My mother lowered her hand. Tears ran down her face. "I'm sorry. Second time?" She stared at me as if she had spent years waiting for me to ask. Then memories began returning. Not slowly, all at once. The beach at night. Black water, cold filling my lungs. My coat becoming heavy as I walked deeper into the sea. The moon above me. The sound of my mother screaming my name from the shore. I remembered going there after another terrible day, believing the water might finally silence everything inside me. I remembered not turning back. I remembered sinking. After that, there had been darkness. Then I had opened my eyes on the beach. I thought I had survived. I had stood and walked away, but no one had spoken to me. No one had looked at me. The money in my pockets was always missing because I had none. I had attended fairs without buying anything because vendors could not see me. I had entered museums without tickets. I had sat in cinemas beside empty seats, While films changed through the decades, the man at the wedding had not been speaking to me. He had been speaking to someone standing behind me. At funerals, I had stayed away because something inside me remembered being one of the dead. My clothes had never changed because they were the clothes I wore when I walked into the sea. I looked down at myself. My old coat was dark with water. Drops fell from its sleeves onto the floor. They made no sound. My mother continued crying. How long? I asked. Her lips trembled. 43 years. I stared at her. That's impossible. You came back the night after we buried you. I remembered returning home. My mother had been younger then. She had stood in this same room, looking at me with terror and love mixed together. I had mistaken it for disappointment. You could see me? I asked. Always. Why? I don't know. She looked toward the photographs on the table. Maybe because I was your mother. Maybe because I couldn't let you go. My younger brother was old now. The children in the photographs were his children. The world had not been changing quickly. I had simply stopped understanding time. Every day had begun with the same feeling because I had already lived my final day. I stepped toward my mother. She reached for me again. This time, her fingers passed through my hand. The air between us turned cold. She closed her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have told you. I looked toward the window. My reflection did not appear in the glass. Only my mother sat in the room, old and alone, reaching toward an empty space. I understood everything then. The distance I had felt between myself and the world had not been imagined. I had been outside it. People had not ignored me because I was strange. They had not seen me at all. I had spent more than 40 years trying to become part of a life I had already left behind. My mother was the only person who could hear me. Perhaps that was why she went out less. Perhaps every visit had reminded her of the night I died. I had believed my sadness was making her worse. In truth, I had been haunting her. I'll stop visiting, I said. She shook her head quickly. No, you need peace. So do you. I don't know how to leave. She looked at me through her tears. Maybe you have to choose differently this time. Outside, evening had begun to darken the street. I thought about the beach. I thought about the water waiting in the same place where I had entered it decades earlier. Every day had felt like the last because it was the last. I had been repeating the same step down into darkness without realizing it. My mother rose slowly from her chair. I loved you then, she said. I love you now. For the first time, I believed someone truly saw me. The room felt warmer. I looked down at my wet clothes. The water dripping from them had stopped. Somewhere far away, I heard waves moving across sand. I smiled at my mother. Then I stepped backward, not toward the sea, away from it. And for the first time since I could remember, the next day did not feel like the last one. Story 5. I'd probably use YouTube more than any other streaming service. At this point, it has become part of my daily routine. Some people come home from school and play video games. Some go outside, meet friends, or do homework right away. I usually go straight to my bedroom, close the curtains, and disappear into YouTube for a few hours. It is how I reward myself after a difficult day. School has never been terrible for me, but it can be exhausting. There is always another assignment, another test, another teacher, reminding us that our future depends on every small decision we make. By the time I get home, I normally do not want to speak to anyone. I just want to be alone. I change into my pajamas, grab some snacks and a drink, and climb into bed with my laptop. I turn off the main light and leave only the soft lamp beside my bed. Sometimes I lock the door too, especially when I know my mother might come in and tell me to start my homework. Then I put on my headphones and let the rest of the world disappear. I watch almost anything. Commentary channels, strange internet mysteries, documentaries about forgotten disasters, videos about abandoned buildings, missing people, unusual crimes, and online communities I would never visit myself. The more unusual the subject, the more interested I become. There's something comforting about hearing another person explain frightening things from the safety of your own bedroom. No matter how disturbing the video becomes, you can always close the tab. You can turn on the light. You can remind yourself that whatever you are watching happened somewhere else, to someone else. That was what I was doing tonight. It had been a long day at school. I had failed a maths quiz, argued with one of my friends during lunch, and spent nearly an hour after class listening to a teacher explain an assignment I still did not understand. By the time I came home, I wanted nothing to do with anyone. My mother was in the kitchen making dinner. She called out to ask how school had been, and I gave her the usual answer. Fine, she asked whether I had homework. A little. That was a lie. I had enough homework to keep me busy for most of the evening, but I had already decided I was not going to touch it until later. I went upstairs, closed my bedroom door, and locked it. My mother did not like me locking the door, but I always told her it helped me concentrate. Most of the time, I simply did not want her walking in while I was watching something strange. I changed into my red pajamas, pulled the curtains shut, and turned off the ceiling light. Then I went downstairs, filled a large bowl with popcorn, grabbed a can of soda, and returned to my room. Everything felt normal. Safe, my laptop rested on my knees while I sat against the pillows. The bowl of popcorn was beside me, and the room glowed softly from the screen. I opened YouTube and started searching for something to watch. Nothing caught my interest. I scrolled past gaming videos, reaction videos, movie reviews, and documentaries I had already seen. The recommendations seemed worse than usual, as if the website had suddenly forgotten everything I liked. I refreshed the page. A new group of videos appeared. Still nothing. I took a handful of popcorn and continued scrolling. That was when I saw the thumbnail. My hand stopped halfway to my mouth. For several seconds, I did not understand what I was looking at. The image showed a person sitting in bed. A bowl of popcorn rested beside him. A laptop sat open across his legs. He was wearing red pajamas. My red pajamas. I leaned closer to the screen. The person in the thumbnail was me. Not someone who looked similar. Not a random teenager with the same haircut. Me, my room was visible behind me. The same gray walls. The same posters. The same lamp beside the bed. Even the small crack near the top of my headboard could be seen. But the version of me in the thumbnail looked terrible. His skin was pale, almost gray. His eyes were red and swollen as if he had been crying for hours. He stared directly toward the camera with a lifeless expression. My stomach tightened. I checked the title. There was no proper title, just a line of random symbols and numbers. The channel name was also meaningless. It appeared to be a collection of letters that did not form a word. The video had been uploaded less than 1 minute earlier. It had 0 views. I looked around my bedroom. Nothing seemed different. The door was still locked. The curtains were closed. My wardrobe stood in the corner. The lamp cast a weak yellow circle across the wall. I looked back at the thumbnail. The camera angle was impossible. The image seemed to have been taken from the far corner of my room, near the ceiling. I stared at that corner. There was nothing there. No camera. No phone. No place where someone could hide. I should have closed the laptop. I should have called my mother. Instead, I clicked the video without hesitation. The screen turned black. A loading symbol appeared in the center. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, the video began. It showed my bedroom. The camera was positioned in the exact corner I had been staring at. The image quality was surprisingly clear. The colors were slightly dark, but every detail was visible. On the bed was me. I wore the same red pajamas. The same bowl of popcorn sat at my side. The same laptop rested across my legs. But it was not showing what I was doing at that moment. The version of me in the video looked terrified. Tears covered his face. His mouth hung open, and he was screaming at someone who stood beyond the camera's view. I could not hear what he was saying at first. His voice was too broken, and he was crying too hard. Then I heard a few words. Please, don't. Mom, the sound of my own voice made my skin crawl. I paused the video. The image froze on my face. I looked at my reflection in the dark edge of the laptop screen. I was pale too, but I had not been crying. My eyes moved toward the corner of the room again. Still nothing. I pressed play. The man recording the video stepped into view. He had placed the camera on something in the corner so that it faced the bed. Then he began walking slowly toward the version of me in the video. He was dressed entirely in black. Black trousers, black boots, black gloves, a black jacket with the hood pulled over his head. His face was hidden behind a mask. It was one of those strangely realistic masks that are almost human, but not quite. I had seen similar ones in horror films. The face had smooth skin, empty cheeks, and a fixed expression that looked calm from one angle and angry from another. The eye holes were completely dark. He carried a kitchen knife. The blade was already covered in blood. The version of me on the bed tried to move away, pressing himself against the wall. The masked man moved closer. He did not rush. He seemed to enjoy watching me panic. I felt sick. My first thought was that someone had created a deepfake. Maybe one of my classmates had taken photographs of me and placed my face over an actor's body. Perhaps it was some cruel prank. The room could have been copied from a photo I had posted somewhere. Except I did not post pictures of my room. I barely used social media. I did not upload videos. I did not have a public account with photographs of myself. There was no reason anyone should have been able to create something so detailed. In the video, the masked man reached the bed. The version of me tried to kick him. The man caught my ankle and pulled me forward. My laptop fell to the floor. The bowl of popcorn tipped over, scattering across the sheets. At the same moment, I looked down at the bowl beside me. Still full. My laptop still rested on my legs. I looked back at the screen. The man hit me. The first blow landed across my face. My head snapped to one side. He hit me again. Then again. The sounds were heavy and wet. The me in the video raised his arms to protect himself, but the man beat him without stopping. His fists struck my face, chest, and stomach. I heard a crack. Then another. Bones breaking. Blood began pouring from my nose. It spread across my mouth and chin. The masked man grabbed my hair and slammed my head against the wall. One of my teeth landed on the blanket. Then, another. I should have looked away. I knew I should stop the video, close the laptop, and run downstairs. But I could not move. It felt as though the video had taken control of my body. My fingers rested on the keyboard, but they would not obey me. I watched myself being destroyed. When the masked man finally stopped punching me, the version of me on the bed barely moved. His face was swollen. One eye had closed completely. Blood covered the front of his pajamas. The attacker stood over him, breathing heavily. Then he looked at the knife in his hand. He turned it slowly, letting the light move across the blade. I knew what was coming. My stomach twisted. "Stop," I whispered. The video continued. The masked man grabbed my foot. He used the knife on my toes first. I will not describe every detail. I do not want to remember every detail. But I heard the sound the blade made as it cut through skin and bone. The version of me in the video kicked weakly, but he had no strength left. His screams had become small and broken. The attacker worked slowly, one toe at a time. He held each one up for the camera before dropping it onto the bed. When he finished with the feet, he moved to the hands. He bent my fingers backward until they broke. Then he cut through them with the knife. Blood soaked into the mattress. The me in the video kept trying to speak. The words were impossible to understand. Maybe he was begging. Maybe he was calling for my mother. The masked man tilted his head as though he were listening. Then he laughed. The sound was low and muffled behind the mask. He took my ears next. After cutting them free, he held them against the sides of his own head. He turned toward the camera and moved them slightly, pretending they belonged to him. It was childish. That made it even worse. The cruelty was not angry or desperate. It was playful. He was having fun. I felt tears running down my own face. I had not noticed myself beginning to cry. The room around me seemed colder. My soda can was still unopened, but water had formed around it and soaked into the blanket. On the screen, the version of me no longer fought back. He lay broken and still. His chest moved slightly. He was still alive. The attacker stood beside the bed, studying him. Then he placed one finger against my swollen lips. "Shh," he whispered. That was the first clear word he spoke. The voice sounded strange, not because it was deep or frightening, because it sounded familiar. I could not understand why. The man pressed the knife against my stomach. Then he slowly pushed it in. The blade entered deeper and deeper until it disappeared completely. The version of me shook once, then stopped. The masked man left the knife inside him for several seconds. After pulling it out, he wiped the blade on my red pajamas. He stepped back and looked down at what he had done. Then he raised his hands in front of his face. He pressed his thumbs and index fingers together, creating a small rectangle as though he were looking through a camera. He moved the shape around, choosing the best angle, admiring his work. My breathing became shallow. I wanted the video to end. At the same time, I was terrified of what would happen when it did. The masked man slowly turned his head. He looked over his shoulder toward the camera. His head rolled unnaturally to one side before settling into place. The dark eye holes faced me. For several seconds, he did not move. Even through the screen, I felt as though he could see me, not the version of me lying dead on the bed. Me, the person watching. He walked toward the camera. His face grew larger until the mask filled the screen. Then he raised one black, gloved hand. Before covering the lens, he whispered something. I leaned closer. At 3:27, the glove covered the camera, the screen went black. The video ended. A replay button appeared in the center. I sat there, staring at it. My room was silent except for the quiet sound of my laptop's fan. I looked at the time, 3:24 a.m. That was impossible. When I had started searching for videos, it had been shortly after 10 at night. I had not been watching the video for more than 15 minutes. Yet somehow, more than 5 hours had passed. I checked my phone. 3:24. No missed calls. No messages. The house was quiet. I tried to convince myself that I had fallen asleep. Maybe I had dreamed the entire thing. Maybe I had taken a nap while scrolling through videos and awakened inside a nightmare. But the video was still open. The thumbnail still showed my face. The upload time now said 6 minutes ago. I moved the cursor toward the close button. That was when I heard my mother scream. The sound came from downstairs. It was so sudden and terrified that I jumped, knocking the popcorn bowl onto the floor. The scream lasted only a second. Then it changed. It became wet, bubbling, a terrible gurgling sound, as though she were trying to scream through a throat filled with liquid. "Mom?" I called. No answer. My whole body became cold. The house fell silent again. I grabbed my phone and tried calling emergency services. There was no signal. That made no sense. My phone always worked inside the house. The Wi-Fi symbol had disappeared too. I tried sending a message to my father, but it would not go through. Then I heard footsteps downstairs. Slow, heavy, step, a pause. Step, another pause. The sound moved through the living room, then toward the staircase. My bedroom was at the end of the upstairs hallway. I slipped out of bed and moved toward the door. The lock was still turned. I pressed my ear against the wood. The footsteps climbed the stairs, one at a time, slowly, the same way the masked man had approached the bed in the video. Step, step, step. I backed away from the door. I looked around for something I could use as a weapon. There was a small lamp, a chair, and a metal water bottle on my desk. Nothing that would help against a man with a knife. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs. They stopped. For several seconds, there was only silence. Then they began moving down the hallway, toward my room. I watched the thin line of darkness beneath the door. A shadow passed over it. The footsteps stopped directly outside. I covered my mouth to keep from making a sound. Something hard touched the door. Then came a slow scraping noise. Metal against wood. The blade of a knife moving across the other side. The sound traveled from the top of the door to the bottom. Then, back up again. My heart felt as though it would break through my chest. The door handle moved once, twice, slowly at first. Then harder. The lock held. I stepped backward until my legs touched the bed. The handle stopped moving. A voice came from the hallway. You watched the whole thing. It was quiet, calm. The same voice from the video. The same strangely familiar sound. I did not answer. The man knocked 3 times. Opened the door. I looked at the laptop. The video page had changed. The replay button was gone. The screen now showed a live video. The camera angle was the same as before, from the upper corner of my room. I could see myself standing beside the bed. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I looked toward the corner. There was still no camera. On the laptop screen, the bedroom door was visible behind me. The handle began to turn. At the bottom of the video, a red symbol said live. There was one viewer. I closed the laptop. The screen went dark. The man hit the door. The entire frame shook. I screamed. He struck it again. Wood cracked near the lock. I grabbed the chair from my desk and pushed it beneath the handle. Then I dragged my dresser across the floor and forced it against the door. The man continued throwing himself against it. Each blow pushed the furniture back slightly. The walls shook. My mother did not call out again. I tried the window. It opened, but my room was on the second floor. The ground below was covered with stones, and the roof beneath the window was too steep to stand on. I considered jumping. Then I looked down. Someone was standing in the garden, a second masked figure. It looked up at me. It wore the same black clothes and the same strangely human mask. It raised a blood-covered knife. I slammed the window shut. The man outside my door laughed. You can't leave before the ending. The door shook again. A piece of wood broke free and fell onto the carpet. Through the new crack, I saw darkness. Then one eye. Not a human eye. The eye was too still, too pale. It watched me through the hole. I moved to the far side of the room. The laptop opened by itself. The screen came back on. The live video continued. But now the camera was closer. It showed my face from only a few feet away. There was no camera in front of me. On the screen, however, the masked man stood directly behind me. I spun around. Nothing. I looked back at the laptop. He was still there. His mask hovered over my shoulder. He raised one finger to the mouth of the mask. Shh! The door exploded inward. The chair broke. The dresser slid across the floor. A black-gloved hand reached through the opening and grabbed the side of the door. I screamed and threw the metal bottle. It struck the hand, but the attacker did not react. He forced the door wider. I saw the mask. The same smooth cheeks, the same empty eyes, the same small, fixed smile. Blood covered his jacket. Some of it looked fresh. He pushed his head through the gap. 3:27, he said. I looked at the clock. 3:26. I grabbed my phone and began typing this. I do not know why. Maybe I believe that if I post it, someone will see it before he gets inside. Maybe the video was a warning. Maybe it was not showing the future. Maybe it was teaching him what to do. The man is hitting the door again. The dresser has moved almost completely away from it. The wood around the lock is breaking. I can hear another person climbing through the window now. The glass just cracked behind me. The laptop is still showing the live stream. There are more viewers. 10, 40, 200. The number keeps rising. People are watching me type. The comments are moving too quickly to read, but they all seem to be saying the same thing. Turn around. Turn around. Turn around. I will not. I know what is behind me. The man at the door has stopped hitting it. For a moment, everything is silent. Then, I hear my mother's voice from the hallway. Honey, open the door. It sounds almost right. Almost, but there is something wet in her throat. Something bubbling behind every word. Honey, the voice says again. It's safe. The laptop screen has changed. The live stream now shows me sitting on the bed, but I am not sitting on the bed. I am standing beside the wall, still typing this. In the video, another version of me is wearing my red pajamas. A bowl of popcorn rests beside him. A laptop sits across his legs. He is scrolling through YouTube, searching for something to watch. Then, a thumbnail appears on his screen. It shows him lying dead in bed. He clicks it. The whole thing is beginning again. The man outside my room is laughing. The person behind me has started breathing. The clock just changed. It is 3:27. And the lock has finally broken.